2 Kings chapter 6 will be continuing through our study. I do encourage you to take a devotional book and to be following along. There's a lot of things we're skipping because we just can't fit it all in on Sunday morning. I've been going a little bit longer than normal on Sunday mornings and just can't fit it all in. So I do encourage you to be reading along and to be learning. Again, if you're not able to be here and need one, just give me a call. I can run one out to you, or they're always online at lakeshorefellowshipchurch.org. Have you ever been overwhelmed by something? I think all of us have. Times in our life where something comes into our life where it just seems so big, so large, so much to handle. So many things going on to try to keep it separate because it seems so overwhelming. Maybe you're walking into a project. Several years ago, my wife and I bought a fixer-upper house. And I didn't grow up doing any construction work. I really didn't know a thing about what I was supposed to be doing. All we know is we found a house at a really, really cheap price. And we know why it was so cheap. And it took a lot of work. Now, for us, we were young and energetic, and, I was at that time, I was in my mid-20s and wanted to take on the project. And I do remember my father-in-law coming to the house, and we showed them the house, and he just looks everywhere, and he's just like, oh, wow. You could just tell that he would be like, I don't want to be involved in this at all because this looks like an overwhelming project. I would probably do the same at my age now if my daughter bought a house and I'd walk in there like, that's a lot of work. We only lived in that house a year, and I was so glad to sell that house because all I knew about that house was work. Every moment of my spare time was spent doing work on that house. Now, the good thing is actually we were able to sell it for a good profit, and we have some money that even set aside now to put towards a little bit of the kids' college bill. So that was a positive thing about that process. But there are times in our lives where we can get overwhelmed. But we need to remember this, that God's armies are greater than any earthly force. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4 says, "Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world." What a verse to cling to. He who is in us is greater than he who is in the world. That there is no problem in this world that God cannot handle, that God cannot take care of. Again, it doesn't mean it's always going to work out well the exact way that we want it to in our exact timing, but we have a God who can work all things out and that can take care of it. He can walk with us each step of the way, giving us the strength and the power that we need. We've seen great examples of God's power through our reading this week. Now, I want you to understand this. Sometimes we doubt God because we don't always see the amazing things that God does. It's kind of like this. Now, many of you are just starting to get on it. I've heard a few people mention things about Facebook and social media, which some of you have. But it's very interesting with social media because what do people post? They often post pictures of when they go on vacation once a year. And when you have, let's say, 400 different friends, some people have a lot more, some people have less, and they all go on vacation once a year, pretty much it seems when you go on social media, like everybody's always on vacation, always having a good time. And it's very easy to then become discontent with your life and your situation, where you're at, and you wish you could be there, and it seems like everybody else gets to do it. But you don't realize that it's there one time a year that they do it. They post it and somebody else posts it. And I think it's the same thing with the miracles of God, the great, huge miracles of God. If you look back over your life, many of you can recount. I can recount things that I can clearly see that this was God doing something amazing. But many times, it's just simply the day-to-day routine of living for God. And sometimes we begin to doubt or question God because we don't necessarily see Him do these awesome, wonderful, amazing things every day. But that's okay. Paul didn't see that every single day of his life. Paul spent some days, hours or days at a time on a ship doing nothing as the wind is not blowing. And he's stuck there in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. We can see God all around us every day, but we don't always see these marvelous things. And sometimes when we read these stories in Scripture, we think, oh, God never does anything for me. He did all this stuff in the Bible days. But remember, these are just kind of the snippets of life, the big events. But it doesn't mean God is not with us each and every day. It just reminds us that God gives us the power we need to live when we need it. What God does is He knows the thoughts of all men. 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning at verse 8. When the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, at such and such a place shall be my camp. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are going down there. And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him, so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. So understand what's going on here. The king of Syria comes down to attack the king of Israel. God in His graciousness and God in His mercy, every time there was an ambush set up for the armies of Israel, is God would send message through Elisha to the king of Israel, and they would avoid going there and they would be saved. Now, could you imagine the king of Syria, how frustrating that would be? Every time you make a plan to do something, somebody changes your plan and they know about it. It's kind of like trying to plan a surprise party all the time, but you can never plan it because they always seem to know what's going to happen and take place. Sometimes it's just frustrating. And here he gets frustrated, verse 11. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, will you not show who of us is for the king of Israel? Basically he said, okay, one of you guys are a spy. Because the king seems to be knowing every step that I take. So which one of you is the spy? But here's what they say. One of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel all the words you speak in your bedroom. And he said, go and see where he is, that I may seize him. It was told that he is in Dothan. So he sent them their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now understand, in today's age, in today's society, this is not a big thing. When it says the king or Elisha knows the words that you speak in your bedroom, that would be a big deal to them. Nowadays, if we found out that the government knew what we were saying in our bedroom, it probably wouldn't be as a big surprise to us, considering we have electronic devices everywhere in our home. And they even sell on the market these little spy cameras and these little microphones and all these things. And people nowadays have cameras in their houses even everywhere that they can watch their house all the time. So it's not as big of a deal today, but in those days, everything, even the king, it says he knows what you say in your bedchamber. That was the very most private, sacred place that nobody else should know what goes on there. But basically saying, look, God knows exactly everything you think or say. You see, God knows all of our thoughts. This is encouraging to me because there are times where I just don't know what to say. I don't know what to think. There are times where it seems that you're just empty or alone, and God is always there. So what he does is the king of Syria says, hey, I'm going to send some soldiers down to the area of Dothan. Now, if you look here on the map, this is the area of Dothan. Syria would be all the way up here, but they were constantly causing problems with the area of Israel. So he says, this is where Elisha is. I'm going to send a group of soldiers down to Dothan, and that's what he does to basically capture or probably kill Elisha because Elisha's causing problems. That's where we see that God wants us to live without fear. That says "are," but it should be without fear. God doesn't want us to live with fear. Without it is what it should say. Verse 15. When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, Alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, Do not be afraid. For those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots and fire all around Elisha. I love this imagery. Here comes the servant of God, and he looks out of the city, and he sees this enemy force surround the city. And he knows they're coming to kill Elisha, which means he's going to lose. Hey, Elisha, what do we do? This man's in a panic because the city is surrounded. What does Elisha ask? God, open his eyes so he can see. God miraculously opens him, and what he sees is he sees the angel world basically going around them, the forces of good that are there, and greater than the forces, the earthly forces of evil. You see, we normally only see the earthly realm. We don't see what goes on in the spiritual world around us, but we're told that greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world. And our prayer should be, God, open my eyes that I can see you. That I can see your power, that I can see your greatness, that I can see that you are on my side. And he says, do not be afraid. You know, we can live life without having to be afraid when we have our eyes open to the greatness of God and realize that his power is greater. And what God can do is God can stop any attempt of the enemy. This is just an amazing story as we continue on. Verse 18. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, Please strike the people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, This is not the way. This is not the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. So get what's going on here. These soldiers come to attack Elisha. They want to kill Elisha. Elisha says, God, open the eyes of my servant so he can see your greatness. Close the eyes of the soldiers so they won't recognize who I am. So they come, the soldiers come, and Elisha comes out there and says, Oh, who are you guys seeking? And they're like, We're seeking Elisha. Oh, he's not here in the city. Okay, this is Elisha saying it. He's not here in the city, but I'll tell you what, you follow me, I'll take you to where he's at. So where does he go to? He starts to take them to Samaria. At that time, that was the capital city. So what he does is he has the people follow him. It's about a 5-mile journey, 5 to 10-mile journey from Dothan to Samaria. And they follow him. The very person they're trying to capture, they have no idea that it's Elisha. Why? Because God had blinded the eyes of the people. They weren't physically blind, but basically they were looking at that and can't see. Some of you think that when you're looking for your glasses at home. You know, how come I can't see them? Oh, they're right in front of my face. You know, you can't see them. Here, Elisha is right there, and they have no idea, and they go down to Samaria. Verse 20. And they entered Samaria. Elisha said, O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Could you imagine those soldiers? They're going to find Elisha. They don't know exactly where they're going, and God is basically causing them to think they're somewhere where they're not. And all of a sudden, it comes to the realization that, wait a minute, we're in the middle of the capital city of our enemies. God ends up sparing the lives of these soldiers, but from that time on, they didn't really attack as much. They kind of backed off on their attack for several years because they saw the power of God. You see, God can do the miraculous things, protect you, many times in ways that you don't even realize He is doing. He can close the eyes. He can shut the mouths. He can open the eyes. He can open the mouths. Whatever needs to happen on our behalf, God can do it. Could be a little thing that you're experiencing. Could be a huge, major burden you're going through. But you have a God who is greater than anything that is in the world. We also see Roman numeral number 2, that God will allow us to suffer because of our sin. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6 says, For who the Lord loves, He disciplines, and chastises every son whom He receives. Now, this doesn't mean that all suffering is from God. There are some groups that teach that all suffering is from God. There are other groups that teach that no suffering is from God, and that neither one is accurate. We see another example here in the New Testament. It says, the disciples asked Him, which was Jesus, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So a man was born blind, and they think it's this man's fault or his parents. Well, how could it be his fault if he's born blind? But they're asking in this, Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So God has a plan and purpose, and sometimes suffering is part of God's plan and purpose. Other times it is a result of sin. So whenever you go through a hard or difficult time, it is not a bad thing to ask yourself, is there something in my life? Is God trying to get a hold of me about something? Is there something that's not right or something that's not good? Now again, this doesn't mean that every bad thing and many things that come our way aren't from God, a punishment from God, but God does punish sin. Why? To be a warning to us. To say, hey, pay attention. Get on the right track. And we see that the Israelites were suffering because of their sin. Look at verse 24 of 2 Kings chapter 6. Now as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And he said, I'm sorry, let's go up to 24. I was reading the wrong verse. Verse 24, Afterwards, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered up his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and they besieged it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and a fourth part of the cab of a dove's dung was 5 shekels of silver. Now understand what happens in those days. So different than our day. And you've seen this before in movies, hopefully, but to get the idea of a siege. What they would do in a siege is people in the whole surrounding area, the farmers and everything, would come into the city with the people who dwelled in the city. They would shut the walls of the city, and they would shut themselves inside the walls for safety. Now, they were safe inside the city, but the problem was they would often run out of food after a period of time. So many battles weren't really actually battles, but they were times they were waiting games. So the soldiers outside would surround the city and hope to starve the people inside until they gave up or were weak enough that they could conquer the city. The people inside the city would hunker down inside the city and hope that the people outside the city would either give up because of hunger or reinforcements would come to help deliver them. So here's what happens. The city of Samaria is surrounded. And this siege took place for quite some time. So after months on end, they start to eat their food. Their food is running out. And it says so much that it uses the illustration of two things: a donkey's head and the dung of doves. Basically, things that in most circumstances would be worthless. I've gone hunting I did hunt for many years. I got several deer over my time of hunting, and I never did anything with the head of the deer. Maybe you guys did if you hunted. Maybe you sucked out the brains and boiled them or something. I don't know, but I never did. What we did is we cut the deer's head off, and then you just take and basically you throw the deer's head in your neighbor's yard as a joke. No, we didn't do that. Occasionally you put it in the mailbox of a friend that you want to scare. You open up the mailbox and there's I never did that either. I've had it done, something like that done to me, not a deer's head, but so basically you get rid of the head. You have no reason for the head. Same thing with the donkey's head. It wasn't a desirable thing whatsoever, but it had some type of meat or value when they were starving. Even to the point where it says here, a dove's dung. Now, most likely it wasn't for food, the dove's dung, but for like a fuel. They would use certain dung as type of fuel to start a fire, different things. And basically, it's saying they are charging outrageous prices for just the head of a donkey. Something that would normally be thrown away is extremely expensive. That's how bad things are in the city. In fact, it was so bad that the king of Israel was without hope. Verse 26. Now the king of Israel, which was Joram at the time, was passing by on the wall, and a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help, my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord will not help you, how shall I help you? From the threshing floor, from the winepress?" He says, "Look, you called to me for help, but I have nothing to give you. Only God can do this, and God doesn't care about us." Well, the reason they were going through what they were going through is because they were living in wickedness. They were living apart from God. They were living in the suffering for their own sin, for their own wrong choices. They were facing the consequence of it. Verse 28. And he asked her, "What's your trouble?" She answered, notice this, how desperate they were. "This woman said to me, 'Give me your son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I said to her, 'Give me your son, that we may eat him.' But she has hidden her son." When the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth beneath on his body. This is how dire the situation was, that the parents were killing their own children for food. I don't think we could fathom it in our society today, but we've never been in a situation like this. And the king rents his clothes because it's such an awful, terrible situation. And he puts on sackcloth. Now, you think he would repent and say, "God, we've sinned. God, we followed idols. God, we need your help." But he doesn't. Here's what he does. Verse 31. "May God do so to me and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today." You know what the king does? He blames Elisha for his troubles. You see, the king was the one who led the people into sin. He was the son of Ahab and Jezebel and lived in wickedness just like they did. And instead of saying, you know what, I need to turn. Now, it wasn't that he didn't have the example. If you remember what's happening this time in the nation of Judah, Jehoshaphat is still king. And they are living in a godly kingdom, and God is blessing them for their godliness, and they have great riches and great wealth, and God has protected them. He knew that. And yet he chose to live in wickedness. And it got so bad that he tears his clothes, but he doesn't repent of this sin. He blames the messenger of God. So easy to blame other people, isn't it? I mean, we see this week. I mean, when something happens, such an egregious act that happened this week, the entrance of the Capitol building by these rioters, basically, and what happens? People begin to blame everybody else. Well, wait a minute. What about the rioters, the one who actually did the act? Those are the ones who are responsible for it. We want to blame so many other people, and it's so easy to blame others. That's what he does here. He blames the man of God. He blames Elisha. Elisha was just delivering the message. So he says, look, Elisha's going to die. Well, they were suffering. Elisha wasn't. In fact, Elisha was being protected by God. You see, God knew what was going to happen. He knew what was going to take place. He warned Elijah what was going to happen. Look at verse 32. Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. Now the king had dispatched the man from his presence, but before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, do you see how this murderer has sent to take off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold the door against him. Is not the sound of the master's feet behind him? And while he was speaking with him, the messenger came down to him and said, this trouble is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? So we're not exactly sure what happens if you read the passage here, but there's a messenger that comes down, and he's either followed by a captain of the guard, or it's the messenger and the captain of the guard are the same person. Not exactly sure. But God says to Elisha, he says, somebody's coming down to kill you. Elisha knows this, and Elisha was sitting with some of the elders of Israel, and he says, shut the door and lock the door so they can't come in and kill us. So the men come, and I'm assuming they talk to the door, talk to the window. I'm not sure how exactly this takes place. But what happens is they have this interaction. That's where we go to Roman numeral number 3, that God works in mysterious ways. Isaiah tells us, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. What Elisha does, not only does God reveal to him what's going to happen here, but it allows him to predict the future, tell him what's going to happen to the nation of Israel. Chapter 7, verse 1. But Elisha said, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow about this time, a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, at the gate of Samaria. Then the captain, on whose hand the king leaned, said to the man of God, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could this thing be? But he said, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it. So this commander comes down, and Elisha says, look, tomorrow, basically a seah of flour. A seah would be the idea of like 7 quarts. So a big thing of flour will be sold for a shekel. Now, if you go back to what it said is how much shekels were a donkey's head, Or I think, what was it, five shekels for a little piece of dove's dung. Crazy. Now all of a sudden you are saying flour is going to be so low in price that we could get this huge pitcher of it for a shekel? That was a cheap price. Commander's like, there's no way in the world that could happen. Even if God opened up a window from heaven and dropped down food, it is impossible, is what he's saying. And Elisha tells the commander, tomorrow you're going to see it, but you're not going to get to eat of it. So he goes on. What happens is God causes the armies of Syria to run away. Look at verse 3. Now there were 4 men who were lepers in the entrance of the gate, and they said to one another, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, let us enter the city, the famine is in the city, we shall die there. And if we sit here, we will die also. So now come, let us go over to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. If they kill us, we're going to die. So they arose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. But when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no one there. So understand what's going on. There's a group of lepers who are living outside the city. There was a disease of leprosy, which was a very bad skin disease. And once you had leprosy, you were no longer allowed to live in the city. You had to live outside the city, and normally you would end up eating the scraps that would be left out of the city. And so therefore you were kind of stuck because the city has no scraps left over because they are just selling their scraps for a amount of high price. There's nothing left for the lepers to eat. So they said, look, let's go to the Syrian camp, and you know what? If they come out and kill us, we die. We're going to die of starvation anyways. What's the difference? We might as well go. Maybe they'll be gracious to us and give us something to eat. Sounds like a good plan because they weren't going to make it anyways. So they go there, and all of a sudden they see there's no one in the camp. Why? Verse 6. For the Lord had made the army of the Syrians hear a sound of chariots and horses, the sound of a great army, so that they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the king of the Hittites and the king of Egypt to come against us. So they fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and they fled for their lives. You see what God does? The earlier miracle had what to do? It had to do with the eyes. You know what happens now? It's with the ears. The Syrians hear opposing armies that aren't even there. And what God does is He causes them to hear these large armies. They think, oh no, armies, and they're going to attack us and they're going to beat us. And they said, let's get out of here. So they didn't pack up their tents. They didn't take their food. They didn't take anything with them. They left their animals. And they left it all. And now all of a sudden these lepers come and they see this camp empty, but yet they see all this food and everything. And God amazingly uses these lepers to help spare Israel. Verse 8. And when these lepers came to the edge of the camp, they went into the tent and ate and drank and carried off silver and gold and clothing and went and hid them. Then they came back and entered the tent and carried off things. They went in and they said one to another, we are not doing right. This is a day of good news. If we are silent and wait till morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore come, let us go and tell the king's household. So they came and called the gatekeeper of the city and told them, we came to the camp of the Syrians. Behold, there was none there. Nothing but horses tied and the donkeys tied, and the tents were there. So they go to the city and say, look, everything's still in the Syrian camp. They're not there. Well, the king of Israel naturally thinks it's a trap. They think the Syrians are trying to lure them out of the city. So he sends messengers and he finds that they're nowhere to be found. They're not in the territory. They're not in the land. The camp is completely empty. And what God does is God fulfills his word. He did it, first of all, by the prices of food being slashed. Verse 16. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Syrians. So a seah of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. They go to the camp of the Syrians, and there is so much food in abundance that what would have been so expensive, even if they had any flour left in Israel, was now so cheap that we would say you could buy it for pennies. You see, God miraculously did something, and that commander who had basically said, oh, there's no way God himself could even do it, is basically what he said. That commander was killed. Verse 17. Now the king had appointed the captain on whose hand he leaned to have charge of the gate. And the people trampled him at the gate. Basically, he was there trying to hold them back, and they just ran right over him, so that he died. And the man of God, as the man of God had said when it came down to him. For when the man of God had said to the king, 2 seahs of barley shall be sold for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour for a shekel, about this time tomorrow in the city gate. The captain had answered the man, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could such a thing be? And he said, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it. And so it happened, for the people trampled him at the gate, and he died. You see, we have these contrasts that are often mentioned in the Old Testament. We have Elisha who follows the Lord, does the right thing. God miraculously provides and uses him. We have the king, we have the commander who what? He doubts God, questions God, seeks to kill the men of God. And they don't fare so well. In conclusion, I want you to ask yourself these questions. First, are your eyes open to the power of God? Sometimes we simply need to pray, God, open my eyes so I can see your greatness. You ever had times in your life where you feel kind of depressed and discouraged and down, and you just go through a period of time? Sometimes what we need is to just say, God, open my eyes so I can see all your blessings. Open my eyes so I can see your goodness. Because it's so easy to focus on the negative. It's so easy to see all the bad things that are happening. We all tend to do this in certain things. Last night, I had a group of people over to play hockey. My hockey rink this year has just been, it's been hard to make ice, to have it really made because it's so warm. But we've had so many people. The last 2 nights, I had over 20 people come out to play. Well, my ice rink has a hard time. That's a lot of people for my ice rink. And it was cold the night before, but I don't know what I did. I didn't do something right, and I maybe put too much water on, whatever it was. The ice was terrible to skate on. I just hated it. It was awful. Yet all these people came out, and even though it was bad ice, they all had a great time, played for 2.5 hours, all different people, and they had a good time. It was so hard for me to enjoy myself, though all these other people are coming to enjoy myself, because I'm sitting there thinking how bad this is terrible, it's awful, and yet these ones come because they love it, they enjoy it, they've had a great time. You know, sometimes we can do that with our life as we focus so much on the negative part. Rather than look, you know what, it might not be ideal, it might not be exactly how I want it, it might not be this idea and awe that everyone's like, oh, this is so wonderful. They don't care, they come out and they have a good time. So what are we going to focus on? Sometimes we're afraid to do things because we think it has to be perfect. It has to be all set up in this exact way and this exact right thing, rather than simply, God, I'm going to simply follow you and I'm going to do it. I'm going to trust you and I'm going to enjoy the good parts of it. And sometimes we simply need the prayer, God, open my eyes so I can see you. We can see God all around us. Whether it's through the nature that we see, whether it's through actions, we can see the negative, we can see the positive. What do we choose to focus on? And our prayer should be, God, open my eyes so I can see what you are doing. Secondly, who do you blame when you make mistakes? The king blamed Elisha. To kind of have your eyes open and say, okay, look, I can do this better. I can do it different. These are situations. Sure, the other person might not have responded right, but was my first response. In many relationships, if we would just simply seek to work on ourselves first, one of the number one pieces of advice that I give to couples who are struggling in their marriage is for each individual to try to outdo one another in love, as the Bible says. Say, look, you might not agree with the way they respond, the way they act, the way they treat you, but you can only work on yourself. You need to strive to be the best husband or the best wife you can be. Forget what the other person does. You can only control yourself. And it's so easy to blame everybody else for something. Oh, if it wasn't for this, it wasn't for that, it wasn't for my boss, it wasn't for my family, it wasn't for my, this person in my life, it wasn't for this situation, life would be so much better. And so it's so easy to look at all that rather than say, what can I control? What can I do? Lastly, do you believe in the power of God to do miracles? Now again, I understand, I'm not expecting that God's going to do a miracle every single time we want something done. God is not a genie in a lamp that does everything we want in the moment. But yet, we have hope and trust in God because we know that He can do great things. The commander said, there's no way God couldn't even do this, even if He opened a window from heaven. That couldn't change. And yet it does. He closed the eyes of some, opened the eyes of others, closed the ears of some, opened the ears of others. God can do miraculous things in and through and around you. I want everyone to bow your heads and close your eyes. Take just a moment here in silence to let God speak to your heart this morning.